Have you ever wondered why your life feels like it's stuck on repeat? Why the same challenges, the same frustrations, and the same limitations keep showing up no matter how hard you try to change things? The answer lies in something called the invisible mental prison. And today, you're going to discover how breaking free from this hidden cage can transform your reality instantly. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're trapped in a pattern that 99% of people never recognize. Your mind is viewing your world through the same lens it used yesterday, last week, and last year. This creates what consciousness researchers call the invisible mental prison, a psychological cage that keeps recreating the same experiences over and over again. But here's what's fascinating. The moment you understand how this prison works and learn to escape it, everything changes. Not tomorrow, not next week, but immediately. Your brain literally rewires itself. Your perception shifts, and opportunities that were once invisible suddenly appear right in front of you. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, and if you're ready to break free from the automatic patterns that have been running your life, type in the comments, "I choose freedom." The invisible mental prison is the unconscious mental mechanism that keeps your life running on autopilot. Think of it like a record player that's stuck playing the same song over and over, except this record is playing inside your consciousness every single day. Your mind observes your world through a specific filter made up of your past experiences, beliefs, and emotional patterns. And this filter determines what you notice, how you interpret events, and ultimately what you create in your life. Here's how it works. Every morning you wake up, and within minutes, your brain activates the same neural networks it used yesterday. You think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, and make the same choices. Your attention flows to the same problems, the same worries, and the same familiar situations. Without realizing it, you're observing your reality through yesterday's lens, which creates experiences today that look remarkably similar to what you've already lived. The prison becomes self-reinforcing because what you observe shapes what you experience, and what you experience reinforces what you observe. If you wake up expecting stress, your mind will scan your environment for stressful situations while ignoring moments of peace. If you believe relationships are difficult, you'll unconsciously focus on the challenging aspects of every interaction while missing opportunities for connection and understanding. What makes this prison so powerful is that it operates below the level of consciousness. Most people never realize they're trapped in this cycle because it feels normal and natural. The familiar becomes comfortable, even when the familiar includes struggle, limitation, and dissatisfaction. Your brain interprets this repetition as safety, so it resists change, even when change would bring improvement. But here's the breakthrough. The invisible mental prison isn't permanent or unchangeable. It's simply a habit of consciousness that can be interrupted and redirected.
Your mind is designed to create patterns because patterns equal survival. Thousands of years ago, quickly recognizing familiar situations could mean the difference between life and death. Today, this same mechanism creates mental highways that your thoughts travel automatically, repeatedly taking you to the same destinations. Every experience you've had gets stored in your neural networks as memory and emotional charge. When similar situations arise, your brain doesn't process them as new events. Instead, it compares them to existing patterns and responds based on past programming. This saves mental energy, but also locks you into predictable responses that may no longer serve your highest good. Consider how your emotions play a role in this process. When you feel anxious, your mind searches for reasons to justify that anxiety. When you feel frustrated, you'll notice everything that supports your frustration while filtering out evidence that contradicts it. These emotional states become familiar internal environments that your brain strives to maintain, even when they create suffering. Your beliefs act as the invisible directors of this process. If you believe money is hard to earn, your mind will notice every example that confirms this belief while dismissing opportunities that might prove otherwise. If you believe you're not creative, you'll unconsciously avoid situations that might reveal your creative abilities. These beliefs operate like search engines, constantly scanning your environment for matching evidence. The repetitive patterns extend beyond individual thoughts to complete life themes. People often find themselves attracting the same type of relationships, facing similar work challenges, or encountering identical money problems year after year. This isn't coincidence or bad luck, it's the invisible mental prison in action, recreating familiar scenarios because familiarity feels safe to the unconscious mind. What's particularly fascinating is how these patterns can persist even when they cause pain. Known suffering often feels safer than unknown possibility. Breaking out of the invisible mental prison requires practical tools you can use in real time when you notice you're operating from automatic patterns. These techniques aren't complex or time-consuming, they're simple interruptions that create immediate shifts in your consciousness and pull you out of repetitive cycles. The conscious pause. The most powerful technique is the conscious pause. The moment you recognize you're thinking the same thoughts or feeling the same emotions you always feel, simply stop, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what am I observing right now, and how am I choosing to observe it? This question immediately shifts you from unconscious reaction to conscious awareness. It doesn't matter what the answer is, the simple act of asking creates space between you and your automatic patterns. Conscious breathing. When you're trapped in the prison, your breathing becomes shallow and automatic. By taking 3 deep, intentional breaths, you signal to your nervous system that you're shifting from autopilot to awareness. With each breath, ask yourself what you want to observe instead of what you've been habitually observing. Physical position change. Changing your physical position can also interrupt patterns instantly. If you're sitting, stand up. If you're inside, go outside. If you're looking down, look up. These physical changes create neurological changes because your brain associates different body positions with different states of consciousness. The perspective flip. When you catch yourself observing a situation from your habitual viewpoint, consciously choose to see it from a different angle. How would someone who loves you see this situation? How would you see it if you knew everything would work out perfectly? How would it look if you believed in your ability to handle whatever comes your way? The reframe question. This is particularly effective. What if this situation is happening for me instead of to me? This simple change in preposition completely transforms how you observe any challenge or difficulty. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, you begin to see circumstances as opportunities for growth and discovery. The gratitude scan. This works instantly to break negative observation loops. When you notice you're focusing on what's wrong, missing, or difficult, immediately scan your environment for 3 things you can appreciate. This isn't about forcing positivity, it's about expanding your range of observation to include what's working alongside what's challenging. The key to all these techniques is practice and consistency. The more often you interrupt your automatic patterns, the weaker those patterns become and the stronger your conscious choice-making abilities grow.
The moment you break out of the invisible mental prison, something remarkable happens in your consciousness. It's not a gradual change that unfolds over weeks or months. It's an immediate recognition that creates an instant shift in your internal experience. First, you experience what can only be described as mental clarity. The fog of habitual thinking begins to lift, and you see your situation with fresh eyes. Problems that seemed overwhelming suddenly appear manageable. Solutions that were invisible become obvious. This isn't because your external circumstances have changed, but because you're observing them from outside the prison that was creating confusion and limitation. Your emotional state also shifts immediately. Heavy emotions that come from repetitive thought patterns, anxiety, frustration, overwhelm, begin to dissolve. Instead, you feel lighter, more energized, and more optimistic. This happens because emotions are directly connected to thoughts, and when you break thought patterns, emotional patterns automatically change. Most importantly, you experience an unmistakable sense of freedom. For the first time, maybe in years, you feel like you have choices. The future stops feeling predetermined and starts feeling full of possibilities. This freedom isn't just mental, it's a full-body experience of liberation from invisible constraints. Your perception also changes instantly. You start noticing opportunities, resources, and connections that were always present but filtered out by your previous way of observing. It's like someone turned on the lights in a room you thought was empty, revealing treasures that were always there.
People around you often notice these changes before you do. There's something different about your energy, your presence, and the way you interact with the world. You're no longer coming from a place of automatic reaction, but from conscious response. This shift in your energy affects every interaction and relationship in subtle but powerful ways. The most encouraging thing about these immediate impacts is that they prove the process is working. You don't have to wonder if breaking free from the mental prison makes a difference, you feel it instantly. This immediate feedback motivates you to keep exploring new ways of observing and being. When consciousness researcher Dr. Joe Dispenza studies the neuroscience of transformation, he reveals how breaking the invisible mental prison literally rewires your brain at the cellular level. Every time you choose to observe differently, you're creating new neural pathways while weakening the old ones that kept you trapped in repetitive patterns. The brain operates on a principle called neuroplasticity, meaning it continuously reshapes itself based on how you use it. When you think the same thoughts repetitively, you strengthen specific neural networks, making those thoughts easier to think and more likely to repeat. This is how the mental prison becomes entrenched, through repetition that creates biological momentum toward familiar patterns. But the moment you choose to observe from a new perspective, something fascinating happens. Your brain begins forming new connections between neurons, creating fresh pathways for information to travel. These new pathways represent new possibilities for thought, emotion, and behavior. The more often you use these new pathways, the stronger they become, until they eventually completely replace the old patterns. This process happens remarkably quickly. Brain scans show that significant neural changes can occur within days or even hours of practicing new ways of thinking and observing. Your brain doesn't distinguish between real and imagined experiences, so even visualizing yourself observing differently begins creating the neural architecture to support that new way of being. The emotional centers of your brain also transform when you break free from the mental prison. The amygdala, which processes fear and stress, becomes less reactive when you consistently choose to observe from a place of possibility rather than threat. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for conscious decision-making, becomes more active and influential in directing your responses to life circumstances. Understanding this neuroscience is empowering because it demonstrates that transformation isn't mysterious or unpredictable. When you consistently practice observing differently, your brain will reliably create the biological foundation to support your new way of being. Change becomes inevitable rather than hopeful when you align your practices with how your nervous system actually works. When you break free from the invisible mental prison and begin perceiving your reality from a new perspective, the changes don't remain contained within your individual experience. Like dropping a stone in still water, your shift in perception creates ripples that extend outward, affecting every area of your life in ways you might not expect. The first wave appears in your relationships. When you stop observing others through the filter of past disappointments or future fears, you begin seeing them as they truly are in the present moment. This shift in your perception changes how you interact with them, which in turn changes how they respond to you. Conversations become deeper, conflicts resolve more easily, and connections strengthen because you're meeting people with presence rather than projection. Your professional life experiences the next wave of change. When you observe your work situation without the limiting beliefs that kept you feeling stuck or undervalued, you start noticing opportunities that were always there but filtered out by your previous way of seeing. You might discover skills you didn't know you had, relationships you hadn't cultivated, or possibilities you hadn't considered. Financial abundance often follows changes in perception because money flows toward clarity and confidence. When you stop observing your financial situation through the lens of scarcity or limitation, you begin seeing resources, opportunities, and solutions that your previous perception couldn't detect.
Your physical health also responds to these perceptual changes. When you observe your body with appreciation rather than criticism, when you see challenges as temporary rather than permanent, your physiology shifts to support healing and vitality. Stress decreases, sleep improves, and energy increases because your nervous system is no longer constantly activated by threatening perceptions. Perhaps most significantly, you start noticing what researchers call meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. When you observe your life as interconnected rather than random, you begin seeing the patterns and connections that link apparently separate events. Opportunities appear at perfect moments, the right people show up when you need them, and solutions manifest just when you're ready to receive them. Breaking free from the invisible mental prison isn't just a good idea or a spiritual concept, it's a practical skill that can transform your life instantly and permanently. Every moment you spend watching this video, you have the opportunity to step out of the automatic patterns that have been running your life and choose to observe your reality from a completely new perspective. The power to change your life has always been within you, hidden behind the familiar patterns of thought and perception that felt so real and permanent. But now you understand that these patterns are simply habits of consciousness that can be interrupted and redirected the moment you become aware of them. You don't need to wait for external circumstances to change before you can experience a different reality. You don't need special training, expensive programs, or years of preparation. The only requirement is your willingness to observe differently right now, in this moment, with whatever situation you're currently facing. What will you choose to observe today? Will you continue scanning your environment for evidence that supports your old story, or will you look for signs that a new reality is emerging? Will you wake up tomorrow thinking the same thoughts that created today's experiences, or will you interrupt the prison and discover what becomes possible when you observe from pure potential? Your transformation begins the moment you stop being a passive observer of your automatic patterns and become an active creator of your conscious experience. The only question that remains is, are you ready to break free from the invisible mental prison and discover who you really are? If this video opened your eyes to the prison you didn't know existed, subscribe for more content that will keep you free. And remember, your new life is waiting for you on the other side of this decision.